Alright, this is going to be a video for just knitting garter stitch. So this is kind of the beginning knit stitch. It's the first thing that you would learn if you were taking a knitting class. And I'm just casting on right now. If you don't know how to cast on, you can look at both of the videos that I posted that are two different ways of casting on. The one I'm using right now that is my favorite is a knit on cast on. So I'm just going to cast on maybe 20 stitches. And 20 stitches is a good number because it's kind of like a skinny sweater or a skinny scarf. And if you're making a skinny scarf, it's just good as a practice size because you know that scarf might be a little bit longer, and you probably do just want to do like a swatch of whatever yarn you're using so that you can see how it kind of looks. And it doesn't have to be exact, but you do want to know how many stitches you have on so that you can count them at the end to make sure that you haven't dropped any stitches, because that's going to be the hardest thing while you're knitting, is trying not to drop stitches. So we're going to start once we have begun by slipping our needle into the top stitch. And you should slip it in from the bottom towards the top, and you can kind of rest them too close together like this, or you can have the back one kind of making an X behind the left one. So you're going to take your yarn and you're going to wrap it in between the two needles. So if they're like this, it would wrap like that, and you're going to wrap it back behind and towards you. And if it's like this, then you can kind of see that it's right in between those needles there. Now, if you watch the knit on cast on video, or if you know how to knit on cast on, this is going to be a little bit easier for you because it's just one different step. So the hard part is right here where you're going to, and just before you begin, check your hands. If your hands are all the way down here, you're not going to have any control, and you're not going to be able to do the steps that you need to. So you want to put your hands, I usually put my pointer finger up here guiding this needle so that it has a little bit more control. And I like to kind of keep my yarn back this way and hold it back here with these fingers. Both of my pointer fingers kind of help me control these the best, and you really can never be too high up with your fingers on these needles. So my fingertip is basically touching the top of the needle here. So I'm going to take this needle and I'm going to kind of go down. I'm going to tilt it down like this. And what I'm trying to do is pick up this yarn and make it into a new loop. So I want to come down, and I make it into a new loop by crossing it through this first stitch that was already there. So I'm coming down, I'm grabbing that yarn and coming through the first stitch. So I want to go under it. So now I'm here, and what I'm just going to do is pull it right off. Pull that first stitch right off. So that now I have one stitch on here. And there's a rhyme that we use when I teach with the kids, and it's under the fence. So you go under the first stitch, catch the sheep, which means to wrap the yarn. Back you go. So you go back from, originally, I'm just gonna take this out so you can see again. Originally you went under the fence, so when you go back, you're going back down. Back you go, and off you leap, so you're pulling that last one off. Under the fence, catch the sheep, back you come, and off you leap. And I'll show it a little bit slower one more time, but you can always pause and rewind at your pace. So you're going to come underneath that first stitch, and you're going to go from the bottom up. You're going to wrap the yarn in between the two needles towards yourself. And then when you do that, I usually like to leave the yarn so that it's back this way instead of like putting it over here or something like that. There are different ways of knitting, like if you knit continental, then the way that you would knit is a little bit different. You'd kind of pick it up like that. That's not the way that I learned, and I don't think it's the easiest way, but that's just my opinion. So I like to wrap it and then hold it over this way. Then I'm going to keep my pointer finger here, and my pointer finger here, not only does it help control this needle, it also helps hold this yarn in place. So then I'm going to put my pointer finger there, come back down through that stitch, and take that stitch right off. So as you can see, this row is a little bit longer than this one, and that's because every time you make a stitch, it's a row that comes down this way. So as you proceed on your work, it's going to get longer and longer from your needles. So even though like sometimes when you first do your first rows, it doesn't feel like you've done much, but as you go, it'll get longer. And what's happening is the series of loops that you're creating with the new yarn by making a loop from the original stitch, those loops are what's making a new row. So these little bumps in garter stitch, these are what will tell you that you've made a row. So right here you can see we've made one row, and then this is our cast on row. So the cast on row looks a little bit different than the other rows. And when you get to the end, a lot of people have trouble with the end, but it's really not any different than the rest of the stitches that you've done. You're going to come under the fence, you're going to catch the sheep, back you come, and off you leap. And then you should have no more stitches on this needle and all of your stitches on this one. Now when you do that, you're going to switch your hands. So every time that you run out of stitches on this side, you're going to switch it. So you should always be picking up the new stitch with your right hand. The stitches that you're taking from should always be in your left hand. So now I'm going to start my next row, and I'm going to do the same thing. Another thing about when you're starting a new row is you're going to see like this stitch is a little bit loose. A lot of times the first stitch on your new row is a little bit loose. When you do your first stitch on your next row, you're going to want to just kind of pull this a little bit tighter, and when you wrap it, just kind of keep it tight so that way it won't be too loose on the end. I don't necessarily recommend doing that for the rest of your stitches because you don't want them to be too tight. But you'll find if your stitches look very loose, then you can always kind of pull, like right now, because I have finished this stitch, it'll pull and tighten this one before I go on to the next one. So if you find that your stitches are loose, you can kind of pull that a little bit, and that will make them tighter. And garter stitch is good for hats, it's good for edges of things, scarves, and I'll post more videos of different pattern stitches. So right now all we're doing is a knit stitch, and there's another stitch called a purl stitch, and I will post another video of that. The reason why there are knit stitches and purl stitches is because the combination of the two makes new designs. So with that siren, I'm gonna go and look for the video on purling. If you knit all the way, this is what garter stitch is gonna look like, and then I will also post some videos of other patterns. So I'll post purling, and then maybe like a knit 1 purl 1, knit 2 purl 2, things like that. So yep, thank you for watching, and have a good day.